Natasha Helfer, but Holly Chase is actually the host tonight, and she runs a group called Mormon Transitions.
Single Mormon Transitions.
Single Mormon Transitions for members of the LDS Church who have transitioned or are in the space of transitioning and are also single. And by transition, we mean like from belief spectrum type of arenas. And we were supposed to do a Q&A on her page, but we can't figure out how to give me permission to do the Zoom thing. So we're going to do it through Mormon Sex Info instead. So that's what we're doing tonight. And so if you happen to be watching this and you're single and you've transitioned from Mormonism, join Single Mormon Transition.
Let me know. Hit me up.
So anyways, I'm going to turn the time over to Holly because she's really running the show tonight.
Well, want to thank everyone for joining us and for your patience tonight. We're about a half an hour behind schedule, but hopefully our two therapists have the time. Maybe we will go until 8:30 Utah time. If that's okay with you, we'll check in with you again. Anyway, we have members of Single Mormon Transitions who have submitted questions anonymously. So what we'll be doing is I'll be reading the questions and Natasha and Tami will be answering them. And a lot of them, they'll be answering a lot of these questions extemporaneously. They haven't seen all of the questions that have been posted. And if we don't get through all of the questions, I'm saving all of them and we'll just get to it the next time. We're going to try and do this once a month. And ideally, if we can, I'll try and shoot for the second Sunday of every month, but if that doesn't work, we'll pick another day. But we'll try and do this once a month. So keep your questions in mind. If we don't get to it, it won't be the last time. But before we get into the questions, I do want to take a little bit of time for Natasha and Tami to introduce themselves to us.
All right, perfect. So I'm Natasha Helfer, and I'm the founder of Symmetry Solutions, which you can find at symmetrysouls.com. You can also find it at the domain getmormonhelp.com because there's lots of issues that people either within Mormonism or without, whether they're in or out, can get some, help on, and we're kind of the specialists in that area. And I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also an accredited sex therapist from the organization called ASECT, American Association for Sexual Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. And I love coming on to this group and being helpful in any way that I can. I am recently single myself, so I have joined the group in that regard as well. And anyway, so I'm happy to be here. Tami.
Hello, everybody. My name's Tami Harris. I am a certified life coach at Symmetry Solutions as well. I have been there for, I think, a little bit over a year, about a year time frame. Really love working with Natasha and getting to be a part of the team. But I'm more on the coaching side, not a therapist, but do coaching work. So I did recently just join the what was it, Holly? Single
Mormon Transitions.
Yeah, so that. So I have transitioned both out of the LDS church and also out of marriage. So I hit that mark as well. I'm really excited to be here. Hopefully can answer some questions just based on personal experience and possibly just some of the work that I've done in my coaching in the last year. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, both of you. Okay, so I'm going to get right into the questions now. The first question I think would be, sounds like it would be right up your alley, Tami. The first question is, how do I go about telling my family and friends that I no longer believe in the LDS church? I have a feeling that they know, but no one seems to want to talk about it.
Yeah, that's a hard one. And I think very individual, right? It's first of all, giving yourself permission to do it on your time frame when you feel safe, when you feel that you are just ready to do that. I don't think there's a right time or a wrong time. It's more of a time that works best for you. And I think actually I'm going to throw Natasha that question as well. I have mostly just my experience. It was a process because I didn't sit everybody down. I went individual to each member, went to my father. Actually, I went to siblings who had left the church prior, got their insight, got their perspective. And that was really helpful because it gave me a support system. And I was lucky that I had family members that went prior before me, and that was very helpful. But it's still an incredibly scary and vulnerable process, but do it on your time frame. I think we get stuck in this place that there's a right and a wrong time, but there's going to be just a right time for you. And if you're still questioned and not settled into it, then give yourself the space to just do it on your time frame.
I agree with all of that. So the only things I would add to that, because it is so individual. I mean, some people are more personally private than others. Some people like to kind of talk about what's going on in their lives and are fairly open. It also depends sometimes if you live geographically close to your family or not. In other words, will they notice the changes more than if you live far away from them? And so then you feel like there's these awkward silences, or whether or not you want to show up at the family reunion in a bikini or not, right? Or drinking your cup of coffee, right? So there's like a lot of markers in Mormonism, right? And in LDS communities where even if you don't say anything, people kind of get a sense that you might not be completely following the tribal rules, right? If that makes sense, as far as do you still belong to the community or not? So those are all reasons. And so I would encourage people to ask themselves, okay, so what are the motivations for being more open here? In other words, why might I want to be open about this? Are those motivations centered in myself, like my own comfort level, or are they centered on my family's comfort level, right? So in other words, I want to, help my mom understand where I'm coming from, right? That might be an other-centric approach. You also might want to think about what the level of intimacy is with the people that you're sharing. So some people you're close to, whereas other people, you might see them once or twice a year. So who do you want to trust first with that information? And how do you want to go about talking about that information? I liked what Tami said, that maybe she chose the family members in her system that had already lived through the experience as the first people she went to, right? So she could support that way. For some people, you might be the first person in your family system who is leaving the church or transitioning or having a different relationship with the church than the rest of your family. And then, so, depending on how intimate you want the relationship to be, if you have a lesser intimate relationship, maybe it's not so important. But if you have a really intimate relationship with your sister or your brother or your mom or whatever, then maybe it is more important for you to sit down and say, hey, I'd really like to have a conversation about this, even though it's difficult and awkward. And, maybe we all don't really know how to talk about this, right? But I'd like to at least try. And then, of course, there's lots of ideas about how to go into it. And the general advice there is, to try to keep it as relational as possible versus informational. So you don't necessarily want to go into a discussion like that with, well, here's all the reasons why, here's the CES letter, here's the 5 podcasts you should listen to, instead of being more like, hey, these are some changes I'm going through, but my main message tonight is that I love you all. I'm not here to try to convince you to think like I do. I'm not here to try to give you a ton of information. I just want to let you know where I'm at, and I want us to prioritize our relationship. So I really hope that we can, even though you might notice some changes in me, that we can still continue to enjoy each other and Sunday dinner or whatever the things are that we typically do.
Well, and I love that too, but and also remember, and I think in the culture we were raised in, that we feel like that we have to tell everybody everything about us, right? It's almost like going into the bishop and just unloading everything, and remembering that not everybody is entitled to your story, nor do they deserve it. So you get to choose who deserves your story and going about it, I love what Natasha said. Go out, don't give them all the information, but then maybe open up space to where if you have any more questions, you can come talk to me and we can discuss it later. But you don't have to tell everybody the whole story. I love what Natasha said. It's just, this is where you're at. And then open up space if they want to come to you instead of you feeling the obligation to do it for them. You're not going to be able to control anybody else's discomfort, but you can minimize and control what you put out there as well. So
excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. I feel like that's kind of reminds me of a skit or something I've seen in a movie where a little kid asks the dad, Daddy, where do babies come from? And the dad starts sweating and getting ready to have the birds and the bees talk. But the kid just wanted to know, are they at the hospital? Like they didn't need to know the whole thing. They just needed to know a little bit. And maybe friends and family just need a little bit.
And just
okay, I'm gonna. Oh, go ahead.
The Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis podcast that is run by John DeLynn. He and his wife Margie and myself have a lot of information on faith transitions through that avenue, and I think that he also has shared most of that on the Mormon Stories podcast as well. But
okay, oh great, thank you. I'll look for the link and share that with our group.
Okay.
All right, well, I'm going to go to the next question, and the next question, actually the next 3 or 4 questions feel really appropriate also for Mormon sex info, so this is awesome. So the second question is, I have difficulty orgasming even by myself. I get really close and then I mentally somehow stop myself. Any tips? I'm female. I think it's left over from guilt growing up masturbating in the church. So
good question. I'll take my perspective of it and then give it to the expert over there. Just in my experience, I realized it took some time for me to get into to begin to have a healthy relationship around sex. I mean, I did in my marriage, but I don't think I really did until I left the church. I was no longer married and realized I needed to get into a space of curiosity. We think that we need to, when it comes to sex, we have to orgasm, right? That means success when it comes to sex. So we have this job to do. And I think especially in how women go about it. And no, that's not true. I think how all of us, right, go around about it, that it's this job, that there's this, it doesn't equal success unless you orgasm at the end. And one thing I realized through my experience is the more I just got curious about physical connection and sex with another person, going in and just finding pleasure versus looking for the outcome in the experience, really just getting present and enjoying the touch or the specific journey of it. And then ultimately it was getting out of my head and into my body, connecting into my body and being present in the experience and the touch and the different things is when I actually started having a better, like, orgasming or orgasming multiple times and getting out of the shame and guilt that sex is a bad thing and learning that it isn't a bad thing, that it's a natural human thing that we get to experience and enjoy with a person and connect with a person. So the mindset of how you go into it was a big thing for me. And if you can try and get yourself into a place of curiosity instead of, because when you're in a space of curiosity, you're more open and you can't be critical. And when you're in a space of curiosity, so go in and have fun with it and play with it and just see what happens without having this anticipated outcome, right? Looking for an anticipated outcome, but just enjoying the experience for what it is.
I love that. I think that taking pleasure-centric approaches instead of performance or result-centric approaches are helpful no matter what the sexual issue is, so that's very, if you're super anxious and like, I have to have an orgasm, I'm almost like, your anxiety just finally just it's like it doesn't really help it in that regard, because you're so anxious or wanting something to happen. And so relaxing, letting things just be, enjoying the process, a lot of what Tami is talking about is a great thought process to start adapting. I have a few other thoughts to maybe add. It does sound like this person is coming from this place of, they mentioned guilt and maybe a space of, so the best way that we can rewire our brain is practice. So nothing like practicing to have orgasms and enjoying the pleasure along the way, right?
It's a sacrifice, right? Sacrifice for pleasure.
Sacrifice for pleasure. Although for a lot of people it is. It's like, I'd rather read a good book, right? Or I'd rather go on a walk, or I'd rather this or that. But I think if you're interested in progressing your sexual potential, your body and yourself deserves this time for you to, think about desensitizing yourself to some of the messages, the negative messages that we have received growing up. LDS. The other thing, this person doesn't really say if it's primarily through solo sex or through partnered sex that this is showing up.
They said they have difficulty orgasming even by myself.
Even by myself. I'm assuming that means in both scenarios. So as with a partner or through masturbation. So one resource that I just always throw out there, it's fairly new, like in the last decade or so, or maybe even less than that, but it's omgyes.com.
Oh, that's right.
That's a great resource. It's a subscription. So you just kind of pay a one-time fee and then you get access to all their videos and educational resources, because the reality is even though we can say, well, every person's different, at the same time, it seems like through the research, there are strategies and ways to move your body or to manipulate your vulva and your clitoris in different positions that are actually fairly effective to reach orgasm. And so that's helpful to know what those are. And they have a lot of different educational videos and other women talking about their bodies and, how to manipulate their genitalia to be able to achieve orgasm. A lot of times too, I tell people that what this is describing is like you're building, and then it's like want. And a lot of people in that first want just get tied into the frustration of that or the anxiety of that and give up instead of maybe seeing that as an edging response. So the female orgasm, or when you're reaching orgasm, it's almost like a tickle type of feeling or sensation. It's almost like a too much sensation, and your body kind of like takes a break from it for a minute. So seeing that as a failure, it's like, oh, okay, I just needed to pause for a second. And so if you're like at a level 9 arousal, assuming orgasm is a 10, and your body's like, oh, now we're back to a 4, so what? So re-engage and keep on climbing up. And if you do that 3 to 5 times, more than likely, your anxiety is not going to necessarily be able to get in the way of that 10 eventually. So that's an edging type of arousal is really important. So a lot of times, again, if you're anxious or thinking, about guilt, well, you probably need to be like stimulated by other ways. So whether it's your partner stimulating you, whether it's erotic materials or songs or music or fantasy, you need stimulation to keep you in those higher levels of pleasure in order to reach orgasm, which is, ultimately a surrender. It's a surrender. And you can't be about the grocery list or how sex is bad or naughty and be able to get to that space. So you need to have stimulation. So what stimulates you? So keep yourself stimulated. And if you're with a partner, this is why foreplay and sexual arousal is so important, to make sure you're not just, 5 minutes in, you're already, trying to reach orgasm for a female body, usually in a partnered approach, the statistics show it's more like 15 to 25 minutes, right, before a female body is going to be able to achieve orgasm. Also, in what ways? Because again, a lot of women think that they should be having orgasms through penis and vagina intercourse. And the reality is that 75% of women do not effectively reach orgasm through that position. So, are there other ways that you can reach orgasm? Can you grind up against your partner's leg, or can you have a different type of position? Sometimes a woman on top is much better than the classic missionary position, or you can do what's called, tabletop or doggy style, but maybe you're pushing yourself up against something. So your clitoris is grinding against something while your partner is, if it's a male partner, entering you from behind, or a female partner who's maybe using a dildo or some type of stimulation from behind, and stimulating your body in different ways, right? So what are your other erogenous zones? Are you including things like nipple play, or maybe anal rimming, or soft, like, are you talking to each other? Again, keeping your mind and body sufficiently stimulated to be able to reach the climax, of orgasm. And back to Tammy's point, if you don't quite get there, it doesn't have to be a wah moment. It can be like, oh, that was really fun, or that was really pleasurable, or I enjoyed a lot of arousal, and then if you've kind of lost the moment, you can relax into something less climactic.
Well, I do want to share also a really great book that I really thought was very insightful and helpful was Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. Fantastic book. And she has some really great perspectives. She goes in a medical standpoint, and then comes in a thoughtful standpoint, emotional, mental, brings the whole everything together. She talks a lot about how you feel about what you feel, and how sometimes we get just stuck in, we're feeling something and, ooh, this feels pleasurable, but oh shit, I shouldn't be feeling, I shouldn't be feeling pleasurable, right? Because that I feel guilty because there's only, it's like, what is your relationship with sex, and diving into that and getting curious about that and seeing if you can start approaching and looking at it in a different way.
I will also say that on my website, natashahelfer.com, I have a library section, and there's a whole
wonderful
orgasm, because there's several books that, I totally agree with. Come As You Are. There's also like Becoming Clitoric by Lori Mintz. There's Orgasm. One of the authors of that is Beverly Whipple, which she's like phenomenal. There's a book called The Elusive Orgasm. And I would recommend these books for anybody who's interested in female orgasm. So if you're a male partner, or a lesbian partner, or a non-binary partner that's interested in whatever partnership you have that's female bodied, to have an orgasm, really good information for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. In fact, this kind of goes into, I think you may have answered the next two questions, but I'm going to read them anyway. One is, what positions are best for female orgasms? And I think you mentioned the omgyes.com has a lot of resources about the positions. You also said that penis and vagina, the PIV sex, doesn't necessarily help with women with reaching, or female bodies with reaching orgasm. Did you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I mean, so missionary position sex in a lot of ways is let's say it's a heterosexual couple, and the male is thrusting on top of the female. The research shows, or at least the theory goes, that depending on where your clitoris is in relationship with your vaginal opening, which can differ by person, the thrusting of the hip, it may not be rubbing up against that clitoral kind of area to give enough stimulation for the female body. Now, there are sex toys that you can buy, like there's different kind of penis rings where you can have like little rabbits or little things attached to them, so that as your male partner is thrusting in a missionary style position, you may be able to get more stimulation into the clitoral area just from adding physical stimulation. You can also have like a bullet vibrator or some type of vibrator that you yourself are kind of stimulating your clitoral area while you're in missionary style position. So those are some ideas. But yeah, women on top, obviously if you're on top and you're able to move your hips and decide where you want your body leaning in regards to, kind of grinding your clitoral area against the body that you're on top of, that can be a very successful way to orgasm. As well as for some, the elusive G spot, right? So I guess there's no, like here's my best understanding on the G spot. When they do like anatomical studies, like, on cadavers and stuff, it's not like you can see a G spot. It's not like, you can see my elbow or you can see my finger. So in a sense, there's no such thing, quote unquote, as a G spot. At the same time, what's being kind of described by a lot of female bodies is that there's a certain area that if you stimulate the G spot, which by the way, it's about like an inch or two inside of the vaginal canal on the side of your abdomen. So not on the side of your back, on the side of your abdomen. If you kind of stroke in that area, kind of like a come hither type movement, there's like a more sensation and almost either more pleasurable or more ticklish, depending on who you ask. And that's what's considered, quote unquote, the G spot. And the idea is that area of your vaginal canal is lying closest to the whole big clitoral structure, because the clitoris isn't just that little point. It's like a whole structure that looks like a wishbone that lies basically aligned with the vaginal canal. So if you're, in a sense, stroking that area, you're probably getting closest to the inner stimulation of the clitoris. Makes sense? So that can be fun. And so a lot of female bodies can really enjoy rear entry sex because in a sense, you're hitting that kind of, you're thrusting into that G spot more so. But again, usually it's not enough to reach orgasm. Usually, not always, it depends. So a lot of our psychology and a lot of our sensitivity to clitoral nerve endings can make a difference. And then the other position that's usually good for orgasm is maybe having, like sitting on the lap of, your partner, let's say a male partner, and sitting, so the partner is sitting up and you're sitting on top of the partner. And so again, you can either use your legs even to kind of like maneuver yourself, and you can, use your hip movement. So similar to the woman on top position, if you're sitting on top of your male partner, it's just another way to kind of move your body around and be in control of the movement and seeing if that will help. But like I mentioned, there's a lot of non-sexual positions, ways of achieving orgasm as well, like grinding, like using a vibrator, like using a dildo, like, so those are all, you can do those kinds of things in all different kinds of positions.
Great. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question because again, this is very related to what we're already discussing. And you've answered some of it already, but I'm going to read it. I'm a woman who has difficulty orgasming. I don't think I ever have started, I don't think I ever have, I think she means orgasm. I started masturbating 2 years ago and have never experienced what other people describe as an orgasm. Is it possible to be orgasming and not even know it? If I'm really anorgasmic, how do I overcome that? I've used a handful of different vibrators and that hasn't worked. I've never been with a partner. I'd like to work this out by myself first.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, which oftentimes is answered too simplistically, like kind of like the porn one. When you see porn, you'll know it. And some people are like, well, of course you would know if you've had an orgasm. But again, some of the research shows that female bodies can have orgasms at different levels of intensity and also different styles. So the original idea of like the sexual response system is that you build, you reach a climax and you have resolution. And for a lot of male bodies, that's fairly typical. That's a typical kind of male-bodied response systems. Of course, that's the one we know about first, right? Because men are always studied before women. But as we've gotten to study women more, you have a lot of different types of orgasm. And sometimes you'll have a woman who, will kind of, instead of peaking way up here, they'll have more like contractions kind of in the middle and smaller contractions. So again, it can be very pleasurable, but not, again, like what people describe, in the sense of like this huge moment where, your eyes roll back in your head and your toes curl. But those can still be considered orgasms because you're contracting in pleasure and things like that. And then the resolution for women is different than for men. They usually have different times, like, Tami had mentioned, like multiple orgasms, right? So things of that nature. There is a vibrator out there. So another resource that I would put out there is called Lioness. LIONESS.io is their website, and I'd highly recommend getting on their newsletter. But their vibrator, their dildo vibrator, actually is connected to your smartphone and will give you a graph of your contractions so that you can actually graph your orgasm, or you're wondering if it's an orgasm or not. and they have a lot of like really good information in regards to helping people kind of understand that. But yeah, I don't know, Tami, do you have anything you would add to that? I mean, I kind of go back to Tami's thoughts of also let's enjoy the pleasure instead of always like the result.
And I mean, that's again, just what I would say is, we're so results driven instead of really just have fun with it. Just have a fun experience with your partner or even with yourself. You can do that if we can get out of our head and really learn to connect into our body, tap in and start sensing from the inside, get into, I know it sounds silly, but there's meditative and breathing exercises that can help you really focus on connecting back into your body, getting out of the mind, getting out of our thoughts and sensing into our body. Because when we're sensing into our body, then, we literally can't do two things at a time, right? And so learning to connect and to be present in your body. And that's by getting curious and having fun and being okay with the awkwardness around sex and just having fun with it, instead of being so heavy about it. Going back, Holly, to what you said about the dad and the boy with the birds and the bees, right? Like adults are always like, oh, we have to make this so serious. And it's like, no, let's have fun with it. We're adults. And if we're consenting, then, just have fun. Let's play. Right. So that's just my thoughts around that.
I like that. I'm also watching the comments in our live video feed, and I saw a question someone had asked, is OMG yes only for women, or are there also resources for men on that website?
So it's a resource about female orgasm, but I recommend that both, again, if you're interested, if your partner's female, then I think, I send men to it all the time. But if this person is asking, is there a similar help for helping men orgasm? I don't know of anything like that, because men also can have issues with delayed ejaculation, with being anorgasmic, etc. Those usually present as slightly different than for a female body. But if that's what they're wanting to know more about, I would just encourage them to reach out to me personally.
Okay.
That's a great question too. And I think men also get in that results driven phase as well, and if whoever you are, man or woman, if we can get out of that space of getting to the end point, and just having fun and getting curious and getting out of the thought that there's right or wrong, that you failed if you haven't reached, ejaculation, or you failed if you haven't reached orgasm. There's no like right or wrong to sex. Sex is just a form of intimacy. It's a form of connecting with someone. And so are you there to connect, or are you there just orgasm or ejaculate? So again, remember, mindset is a big part of it as well.
And I'll yes and that. Like I think a lot of sex therapy work is about helping people be more pleasure centric and not worry so much about results. And I will say also that if you've never experienced an orgasm and the rest of humankind seems to think this is a big deal, it's
Right.
understandable why that might be distressing to you, right? Like, well, I don't want to miss out, or I want to figure this out about myself, or what's wrong with me, or, all those kinds of kind of normal questions. So that's why I think it is important to yes and it, right? On the one hand, like relax and enjoy the pleasure, and it's okay to prioritize this in your life or to spend time trying to find resources that will help you. And the same with male orgasm, for a lot of men, sometimes these issues come more with age or with changes. So it's like, if you know what it was like to have an orgasm, fairly easily, and it was super fun and lovely, and then all of a sudden you're going through a stint in your life of delayed ejaculation or anorgasmia, you're like, well, I know what I'm missing out on. I'd really like to experience that again, like, again, what we get a lot of anxiety about what's wrong with me. And that's why I really like the book title by Emily Nagoski called Come As You Are, which really is a word play on accepting ourselves, right? Come as you are, instead of seeing yourself as broken or deficient in some way or another.
Yeah, I love that, Natasha. Yeah, thanks for adding. Thanks for anding.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, Natasha, I think it was an interview I saw you do maybe 3 or 4 years ago where you mentioned Betty Dodson. And I started watching her videos. She's passed away now, but she was still celebrating orgasms up until she was 83, 84 years old, and teaching women how to orgasm. And in one of her videos that she did with her partner, I think her name is Carlin Ross, they talked about how men focus so much on the climax or the ejaculation, but they say orgasm for men actually can start even before that point. And they can also achieve a lot of pleasure, a lot of enjoyment if they don't focus on the climax, but focus on leading up to that. And so there is a difference with that too. And they felt that having this idea that orgasm was only the ejaculation really hampered their ability to experience pleasure.
Yeah, no, I agree. And male bodies can orgasm without ejaculation. And in fact, so I don't know how many people know this, but most male bodies will, if you live long enough, will get prostate cancer. So it's kind of just a matter of time. Now, some men get it earlier than others, and so you want to treat that, of course, but obviously a very common procedure then is a prostatectomy, right, to get the cancer removed and things like that, which means that you will actually no longer be able to ejaculate. So you'll have dry orgasm as a male body after that happens. So, and that can be sometimes, we're just attached to things that we know, right? So if you've always ejaculated and then all of a sudden you're not, that can feel weird or different or awkward or less pleasurable even. And even for the female bodies or the male bodies that they're attached to, right? So their partners can miss. Some people might be like, oh, good, I don't have to deal with the mess anymore. Some people are like, I love the mess. I love the stickiness and the fluids. And I love that part about you that comes on me, et cetera. And so there can be just different experiences with the shifts and changes that come with aging, quite frankly. And I think a lot of us, as we expect kind of our 50, 60-year-old bodies to act in similar ways as our 20 and 30-year-old bodies. And that just isn't the case. And a lot of, I'm assuming, the reason I mention this is because I'm assuming a lot of people in this group are, some may be single from the get-go, but a lot of you may be divorced and maybe mid range, in your age or even older. So there are things that shift and change as we age. And then on top of it, you're dating. And then on top of it, you're trying to figure out your sex life. And it's a lot of different intersections, right, of what can be happening.
Well, I'm watching the time. It's, let's see, for me, I'm California time. It's 7:38. So that would be Utah time, a little 8:38. Do we have time to take on some more questions? We got through 4 tonight.
I mean, I think we started right at the top of the hour. I can continue until the top of the hour. I don't know about you, Tami, how you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, we can go a little longer.
Yay! Okay. We'll try and get through these. This next one is really fun. Do you think everyone needs to go through a hoe phase?
I love that question.
Oh,
Embrace the hoe, ladies.
positive ways, right?
Well, yeah, it's all how you look at it, right? And your relationship with your sensuality and your self-esteem or your confidence around that. I'm going to bring it back to what works best for you. How, if it's something that you want to explore and experience, and you can look at it in a healthy way, to where there's not shame or guilt wrapped around it. I'm not going to say it's for everybody, but I do, friends that I socialize with, people that I've talked to about these things, that's been an important part of their just evolving into who they are as an individual. It's going out and feeling like you can sow your oats. It's that exploratory phase of knowing and trying to understand yourself and how you connect with other people in a physical, sexual way. It also allows you to decide if that's an approach that you want to take. If you're more of a monogamous type of person, or you want to explore the areas of being more open in your relationships. But like I said, I would just put it back on you as an individual. What do you feel that works best for you? And where do you feel safe in these places? Some people, this is a scary world, not in general. I'm just saying, stepping into that space of owning your sexuality and owning your sensuality and being okay to put it out there. And so I'm going to put that back on you as an individual. What do you want? And how are you willing, how far are you willing to go? And what feels safe for you, or how far are you willing to explore that? I say embrace it, whether it's physically or anything. Let's change it. Let's change the stigma away of being a bad thing, and just like own your wholeness, own your sexuality, own your sensuality. It's our power, take it back, sisters.
I like that.
This individual thing is really important. I think there's a lot of story making around what a sex life should look like, or even what developmental phases should have looked like. And especially coming out of a Mormon kind of community as a transitioner, you may have a lot of stories in your mind. For example, I should have had more sexual experiences when I was a teenager or in college, but instead I either stayed celibate because of my Mormonism, or if I was married, I married my first sexual partner, and now I'm not, I never went through that phase. So, it's not as glamorous as we might think as Mormons, right? So I've read a lot of the research, and I've seen actually a lot of clients who don't come from Mormonism, and you hear a lot of pros and cons either way. I mean, there's plenty of people, even outside of Mormonism, who've only had one sexual partner and are in a monogamous relationship and are actually very satisfied with their sex life. There are plenty of people who've had lots of sexual experiences and haven't necessarily had great experiences with their sex lives, right? So I don't want us to fall into black and white thinking, like, I'm ruined because I grew up Mormon and I never had my teenage college experiences, which you may or may not have had anyway, right? So you can assume that you would have had opportunity or accessibility to that, or that it would have gone well, right? I mean, all you have to do is read like Ornstein's books, like Girls and Sex and Boys and Sex, to realize that there's a lot of sexual stuff that's happening at that age, between like 18 and 23, that is difficult and full of negative messages too. Like, Mormons aren't the only people who are sexually wounded, right? Or coming at things more from like performance or slut shaming, or, all those things. Like, we didn't make those things up, and they're not only happening in our community, I guess is what I want to say. So I really like Tami's invitation to really sit with yourself and think about where does at this particular point of my life, given what I know and have experienced, and given what I think my values or my ideas are about where I'd like to head and what I'd like to explore, do I want to experience or, play around with casual sex or hookups or non-monogamous options? Is that an area I'd like to at least explore? And one thing that's different, I think, in a transition space versus a more LDS traditional space is that instead of seeing that exploration as good or bad, right? I'm either going to do something bad or good. You can take it more like a data collection exploration. What do I like or not like about this exploration as I move forward? And then you learn more about yourself. So let's say you do end up having a casual sex experience and you really thought it was kind of horrible. You don't have to go into the space of like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? I regret all things. It's kind of like, okay, maybe I collected some data that that's not so much for me, or that I'm a person that needs more emotional connection or trust to be part of the relationship before I jump in sexually. And then another person might be like, oh, that was really fun and there's no strings attached. Wow, that's something I didn't expect. So again, not good or bad. It's like good fit or not as good of a fit, or maybe I need to explore a little bit more before I make that decision. I do think that some people end up, having a sexual phase. Maybe I don't know if I love the word phase, but a sexual maybe space in their time where they do explore outside of what they end up finding their norm to be, right? So maybe you go through a 2 to 5 year space where you do have more sexual partners, but then end up in a monogamous traditional relationship anyway, right? And you kind of like, well, I did that and I was there, and this is what I liked about it, this is what I didn't like about it. I still wanted to end up in kind of more of a traditional space. And then there's people who really kind of see non-monogamy and casual options as more of a lifestyle and what they want. They want more freedom. It's interesting that the research coming out of like 60-year-old plus, especially females, are not that interested in remarriage, right? They are interested in sex, and they're interested in companionship, and they're interested maybe even in monogamy, but not necessarily marriage. And there's quite a few people now in like 50 plus that maybe have 2 or 3 committed relationships, but they're not committing to one. So there's lots of options, right? And now it's kind of like you hopefully have some wisdom, you have some experience, hopefully you know how to have safe sex, and you can make, you can take risks that are calculated, not crazy risks, but you can take risks that you're like, I can put myself in this space to explore and see what the cons or benefits are for me.
Well, and I think it's also, oh, sorry.
No, I just want to say it's not necessary. It's not like if you've only had sex with one person and then you get divorced and then you have sex with another person that you end up remarrying. It's not like you've missed a whole developmental phase that you should have done.
Right. Right. And I think when we're going through a transition process, it's a really hard place to be, because it's like we're uncalibrated, right? We're not grounded. We sometimes, especially transitioning out of a belief system, we haven't realized what our core values are, or we don't know who we want to be or how we want to show up in the world, or that we even have permission to do it however we want to, because we've been so used, we've had the playbook. This is how you do it. Mm-hmm. This is the way it's done. This is what success looks like. And so sometimes freedom can be a little scary. And so just know, again, take baby steps if you need to. But then also, if you go into that space and you have a negative experience, have a little compassion on yourself, and be able to say, hey, you know what? We had this experience. I don't like it, so I'm going to change it, or I'm not going to do anything with it. But the human experience. And I love what Natasha says, do the data collecting, get into that space again of curiosity.
And only use the hoe word if it's funny or if you're kind of
Yes.
reclaiming it, right? Like the slut word or anything like that, because who who gets to decide how many partners are too many, and who gets to decide how much sex is too much, right? And historically, females in particular have been very shamed for being sexual, right? So we have all these words that we don't really use for men. We don't usually say men are promiscuous. We usually reserve that for women, right? There was a whole diagnosis. What was the diagnosis? Oh my gosh, I can't forget.
Hysteria?
Oh, that one. Yeah, hysteria. But there was, it's a nymphomaniac.
Oh, yeah.
Female disorder. It didn't even apply to men, right? So, I mean, have fun with the words hoe and slut and all that. But at the end of the day, don't really allow yourself to identify with that type of really negative messaging. If I want to have
Right.
10 different partners and have 10 different sexual experiences on a given week, that's my prerogative. I'm a sexual agent and I decide those things without having this imposition from society saying that there's something wrong with me or that I'm hypersexual. What I'm much more concerned about are people following principles of sexual health, which have to do with consent, non-exploitation, protection from STIs and unwanted pregnancies, honesty, similar values with the person so you're not leading people on, and mutual pleasure. Those are the 6 principles of sexual health that Doug Braun Harvey talks about. I'm much more concerned about that than how many partners you're with or how many experiences you're having.
Very good. I'm going to mix the order of our questions because there's one question that came actually from a few people, and it's off the topic of sex necessarily. So we'll have a relationship-oriented question now. I've often heard that disorganized attachment is healed through safe relationships, but once I'm triggered, I quickly fall into the same pattern of avoidance and don't realize I'm doing it until after the fact. How can I work on my attachment issues myself so I can actually stick around and enjoy these relationships?
Okay, so
yeah, I'm going to throw that at Natasha.
So basically, for those who don't know, I mean, there is like a theoretical framing about different attachment styles, right? And that comes from the research of, I don't know exactly when it happened, but many, many years ago, where they did studies on toddlers and mothers, okay? And they would observe the toddler as the mother left the room. And they came up with 4 different attachment styles, which I have to look up right now because I don't totally remember. But secure attachment.
Avoidant.
Yeah, there's secure,
anxious, secure, and what was the 4th? I don't remember the 4th.
Fearful. So it's secure, dismissive or avoidant, anxious, and fearful. And this led to what's called now attachment theory. And there is a really good book called Attached, and I would recommend it if you're interested in that. The basic idea is that, if you had secure attachments, if somebody fed you when you cried or picked you up, or, took care of your needs, then you trusted humans and trusted that your needs would be met. And so then as you grow up, you are more able to have healthier relationships. Whereas if you fall into some of the other categories where your needs weren't really met as much, you might show up as avoidant, anxious, or fearful. And this, I wouldn't say this is an area of expertise of mine. Like, this is not like the model I work from. I do think it's a somewhat helpful model. At the same time, I will say that some of these models, when it comes to sex, don't always work, because you can be pretty securely attached to somebody and not have a great sex life with them. So there is some interesting interplay there. But I think that this person is asking about not necessarily sex, but relationship quality, right? And so I do think that this, if the person thinks that this is something that is really getting in the way of their relationships, and that, like they said, when they're triggered, they regress back to older patterns that are not as healthy, my main recommendation is individual therapy, quite frankly, right? So it would be really understanding your own emotional regulation. There's a lot of different ways therapy can go in this, kind of like reparenting yourself, emotional regulation, and focusing on skills and ideas of how to do that. You could go to a cognitive behavioral therapist. You could go to somebody who really delves into attachment style theory, and you want to diversify your relationships, right? So not just your partner, but how does this show up also in your friendships or in your family of origin or your extended family? How are you showing up? It will require good relational boundaries as well as self-awareness. And again, like usual, a lot of practice, right? And how do you develop a diversity of coping mechanisms? Because sometimes when we're upset or anxious or triggered, this person used the word triggered, it's in that moment you just want to help yourself feel better. And if you don't have a diversity of coping mechanisms and self-awareness and emotional regulation skills, then you're going to go to the easiest thing. And if the easiest thing is this kind of unhealthy relationship that's there for you because it's unhealthy and it's easy to get to, then you're going to find yourself kind of repeating that. And that's true of all kinds of things. That's true of like our habits about eating, our habits about self-care, our habits about, Netflix. If all I know how to do and feel better about myself in that moment is this particular thing, then I'm going to lack the ability to be more diverse in my ability to self-soothe, self-regulate, so that I can pass on that easy style and survive until the healthier style is more available to me.
So you were saying doing individual therapy and finding someone who specializes with attachment theory or cognitive behavior. Would that be?
I mean, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that just is a big umbrella for a lot of different types of therapy approaches. Maybe somebody who does focus on attachment theory, emotionally focused therapy, EFT. And even if you're a couple struggling with this, like a lot of times we attract kind of an opposite style attachment person, if that makes sense. So then, but if one of you is fearful and one of you is avoidant, then you've got like the clingy, but then the stonewaller, and so these patterns can show up in a lot of couple ways. But it is not, I guess I want people to take a chill pill about it too, because it's not diagnostic. It's not like attachment disorder shows up in the diagnostic book and now you've got a disease or a mental health disorder. These are kind of like theoretical models to help. Most of us probably didn't get all of our needs met when we were kids. Right? We're all probably, there are all of us struggle with some level of emotional regulation, but some of us more so than others, right? And so if you know that you seem to struggle more than your friends, or it's definitely something you can look into. I just don't want people to walk away thinking, oh my gosh, I'm sick, I have a disease, I have an attachment disorder. It's not like that. It's more theoretical. Yeah.
That's helpful. It's nice to think of that as it's not a disease. It's not a diagnostic thing. It's just a theory.
Yeah, it's theoretical. It's based on good research. There's some good books about it. Like Attached is the one that I would probably recommend the most. And there are therapists who kind of really, that's their jam, just like kind of like my jam is sex therapy. Some people are really into attachment theory and emotionally focused therapy, which I think focuses a lot on that.
Well, and again, remembering you're not broken, right? This is not, having awareness around maybe how you attach to other people or connect with other people. It's just nice having that information. It's getting education. So then again, you can retrain your brain. We can rewire things or get into habits to where we can behave differently. And so, don't get caught up unless if it's helpful to you, having this label, oh, well, I'm an avoidant, so this is why I'm going to behave the way that I behave. Instead of looking at it, oh, these are some things that I do. Maybe I can get some education on it, to where, because I don't like it, it's not serving me in my life. So if I have gain this information, then it allows me the space to be able to choose differently, to behave differently. And again, like Natasha said, and all of these things, it's a process. It takes time and it takes practice, so again, no, you're not broken. It's just educating ourselves on maybe why we do the things that we do, so then we have a better understanding and be in a place of choice of choosing differently or behaving differently.
And like anything problematic like this, it can lead to mental health disorders. Somebody with insecure attachment of some sort and not a lot of relational success, it may lead to clinical depression, right? Or to social anxiety, or to some of the things that we would consider more in the medical model. But I just want to clarify that it's not a diagnosis in and of itself. It's more like, like kind of like a personality test, like, am I a type A or type B, right? Or it's kind of more in those lines.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm watching the time and it's the top of the hour. I'm going to save the last 2 questions for next time because I want to be mindful of how generous both of you are with your time. Do any of you have any closing thoughts that you would like to leave us before we conclude our Q&A for tonight?
Well, I'm just always grateful to be here and to be helpful, hopefully. I just want to plug Tami, obviously. She's a great life coach, works a lot with transitions, works a lot with divorce. In fact, you're in the middle of offering a divorce workshop. Is that correct?
Oh.
Yes, I am providing a 5-week workshop called It's Over, But I'm Not Over It. So we are going to be talking a little bit about different attachment styles and giving you tools, or some different insights and perspectives on finding different approaches and different ways to heal from divorce, to heal from long-term relationships, and discovering a better sense of yourself. So 5 weeks, it's an hour long each night. It's a Zoom call workshop, and I actually posted in regards to a question someone had in your private group today, Symmetry Solutions event page for this. So, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, in a DM or through Messenger on Facebook. Yeah. So and thank you so much for letting me come tonight and chat with you guys and kind of give my perspective a little bit on these topics. Hopefully it was helpful to all you out there, and thank you.
And Tami and I will be offering a faith transitions support group as well, both in person if you're kind of near the Holiday, Utah area. We'll have room, I think, for 20 people to join us because we're trying to be somewhat COVID safe in that regard, but we'll also be offering that on Zoom, and that will be a donation only type of event. So, and that will be kind of like a 6-week rotating course as far as just some basic ideas around faith transitions, especially since your first question was on that. And so, yeah, if you want to know, we're trying to come up with a lot of different supports and groups and things as far as the Symmetry team. That's kind of our push this year, is like how many different support things can we offer as a team. So going to the Symmetry Solutions events page will keep you all posted on all that. And of course, Tami does individual work as well. So individual coaching, especially if you're not, transitions are difficult. They don't always require necessarily therapy. Sometimes just having some strategies, some ideas, some accountability, some suggestions can be really, so life coaching is actually a really good fit for, religious transitions for a lot of people. For some people, it becomes a bigger kind of issue and is tied more maybe to trauma or to other mental health diagnoses. So therapy might be more indicative, or both. A lot of people like to have their coach, but then their therapist for more clinical reasons. Tami offers that individually, and she's great. We get always great feedback on the surveys about her services. So just, I'm just trying to, a lot of people know who I am, but they don't always know all these amazing people for me.
Yeah.
Oh, Tami's amazing. So yeah, so know that she's a resource and does a lot of great work in these areas.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And for those of you who are watching this video, I would also like to plug our group. If you're watching this on Mormon Sex Info and you've never heard of Single Mormon Transitions, this is a group. We're over 700 people right now in the group. It's been around for 5 years, and it gives support for anyone who finds themselves stepping away from traditional orthodoxy in the Mormon church. So from people who are still attending church, but have more progressive or more open, more liberal ideas, or more inclusive, more accepting views, all the way to people who have resigned completely from the LDS church. We're here for you during the quarantine. The shutdowns, we've been doing everything virtually, but we try to encourage people to host meetup events and social mixers wherever they find themselves. I understand we just had a mixer, literally a mixer, because it was on Alcohol 101 that was hosted by a member of our group. So it was a mixer about mixing drinks from a professional bartender, but it doesn't, our activities don't have to be centered around alcohol. They can be around a lot of different things. And join the group so that you can be part of these future Q&As and submit your own question too. So look for Single Mormon Transitions. It's a private group. It's actually secret. You can't find it, but we have a screening group that you can find under the same name. And you'll only see a few people in that group. And that's just to make sure you're legit before we bring you into the private group. So come on board. It's a fun group.
And I'll also, since you mentioned the meetups and the mix, we have our office space in Holiday, Utah, where either, depending on the event, we're actually happy to rent it out or even offer it for free, depending on what type of event it is, if people need a space to gather.
Oh, great.
I know that singles are always, in a sense, interested to meet each other and, possibly date or just make friends or all those kinds of things. So we'd love to offer the Symmetry Solutions office space, which is also sponsored by Thrive, which is another community group, Thrive After Mormonism. So that's a space that's available. It can fit about 30 to 40 people if people want to have.
Oh, that's good to know.
But sometimes it's hard to 30 people.
Have a home that's big. Yeah, big enough.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was lovely. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Yes.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
We took the long road home, turned minutes into miles. And as the evening traveled on, the sunset bathed your smile. We stopped beneath the desert stars, wrapped in each other's arms. Was as simple as I love you, an ordinary, extraordinary truth.
It's been a long road here, a trail with tears, pain and sorrow too.
But through every storm we traveled on, like lovers do. And if sometimes we fell apart, we always came back home. Was as simple as I love you, an ordinary, extraordinary truth. every sunrise. Can't imagine life alone. Let's take the long road on together until we're gone. Want you by my side till the day I die and into the beyond. It's as simple as our love is. That's how I wanna go. All wrapped up in the arms of our extraordinary. It's nothing ordinary love. Ordinary. No, it's extraordinary.